So the objective premise I want to review with you is the nature of the church. And that's not too much for you here, but for other people who'll be looking at the tape. And first of all, the Catholic Church was established or defined by Christ, not by modern popes. All right? Not by modern bishops, nor even, now, by mutually proclaimed experts and authorities. Not even they define the church. Jesus Christ defined it, not them, not any of that group. And another thing we should try to realize, this will help you to understand Canon Hess and accept them better, those who have any doubts. And the Catholic Church is and always will be one with the past Catholic churches of all times and places. It's not just an organization with unity in the present time, unity and conformity. And another thing is the Catholic Church is a church of law. It's not a church of anarchy or despotism. That's not the Catholic Church. And right now we're in a time of ecumenical anarchy and local tyranny. But that's not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is ruled by law, including canon law. And Canon Hess will refer to canon law, and whether we like it or not, that's the law of the church. Above that is divine law, of course. And the Catholic Church is defined by infallible decrees of popes and not by the fallible allowances or policies of modern popes. So we have all of these contrasts. The Catholic Church concerns religion and salvation. It doesn't concern politics and sociology. So all of these things are jarring, but I'm saying them not for you all here, but for somebody who might be looking at the tape. That's a different church. It's not the Catholic Church. No matter what it calls itself, it wouldn't be the Catholic Church. Real Catholic Church is concerned with religion and salvation, not with politics and sociology. And the Catholic Church is the church of apostolic tradition, not the church of living and mutable, politically inspired policies and decrees, what they now call living tradition, or the living magisterium. So that's the objective premise which will help you to accept Canon Hess and what he says today. Now, the subjective premise is you should prepare yourself, especially those who are looking at it on the tape or hearing it on the tape. Be open to hearing a radical and shocking exposure of the Catholic faith. We're a generation that hasn't the foggiest notion of what a Catholic is. We don't have the foggiest, except for some of you here, of course, most of you here. And if possible, be edified, or at least be honest and say, right now I can't accept what he says. But by God's grace, something might register that you, as happened to me in the past, something that you don't like, and it registers in your mind, and it might be the thing that will save you from hell. So at least listen and hear. If you can accept, if you can't accept, store. Put it in your memory bank, because maybe you can call it up later on. It might be just the thing that will solve your problem at that time. For example, if in the near future they tell you that you're going to be excommunicated by joining the Pius X Society, then, or by, no, excuse me, not by joining it, but by using its services, then you just ignore that, because you might have something stored that Canon Hess said. Then you just recall that. So you will reject heresy. Now, in case there's any legalist here, question might come up in your mind, should Canon Hess be allowed to give facts and solid Catholic teaching in the church in America? Should he? Well, or shouldn't the establishment church forbid him? Well, in good Jewish fashion or Hebonic fashion, I answer the questions with questions. How can a church which forms 2/3 of its youth to reject the natural law? That's a law everybody's accountable for, no matter who they are, as long as they're not an imbecile. How can that church, which leads 2/3, at least conservatively speaking, of its youth to reject the natural law, condemn anybody? Question mark. All right. And how can a church which apparently, but effectively, at least effectively, rejects, opposes, and condemns binding Catholic truths, forbid you to hear an Orthodox Catholic theologian? And that's what they do, as Canon Hesse will point out. And also, as he will, in the whole course of the 3 lectures or 4 lectures in the tapes, of course. And how can a church within which 80% of its followers in the United States of America reject binding Catholic Eucharistic dogma? You know, they're not even close to Catholics. 80% of Catholics, Novus Ordo formed, alleged Catholics who aren't, in the United States of America reject the dogma which you have to believe to be a Catholic on the Eucharist. Now, how can that church, its leaders who led the people to do that, how can they condemn Canon Hesse? So in good Jewish fashion, am I saying they can't? No. I'm a good Jew here. And I'm answering the question with questions. All right? So don't say, I said this, because I didn't say anything. I just asked questions. Now today we want to thank Maida, and especially the dedication of its 2 principals, Vera Muller and Richard Ahern, for what they've done in helping to bring Canon Hesse here and helping them to enjoy a stay here in New Orleans. And so we want to thank them first of all. And this series can be obtained from Maida, the series of talks. And in general, this is a general introduction to Father Canon Hesse. I know you've been called worse things than Father. Okay, but Canon Hesse, 15 years. He spent 15 years in Rome. He knows, and he's met with several cardinals and even the Pope. Now, don't ask the Pope, because the Pope won't admit knowing him. All right. So anyway, and also he was secretary to Cardinal Stickler, who was one of the top curial cardinals who's now retired. And I met Canon Hesse in Rome at the conference for the bishops. He helped to give it with me. And there's one other person, Malengo, but the rest weren't that good. But anyway, he was the star of the show. Malengo, he hit the show the most because he was so startling with the devils in the Vatican. He said he saw him. He said Pope Paul VI saw him come in, said he was in there, and he said he hadn't seen him leave with his luggage yet. And so Malengo was the hit, and then Canon Hesse was the real hit as far as depth goes. And the best compliment I can give to him is that he's on the endangered species list. So he's one of the few authentic Catholic theologians we have left. I don't know how many they got, 10, 15, 20. But anyway, it's an endangered species, and he's one of the few living members of that endangered species. And so we'll start with Canon Hesse right after he gets hooked up. And again, remind you to keep quiet all the time. And Richard, you can cut all this out. He's going to hook up. And Richard, is this thing making too much noise? Remember it gave us trouble before? Just get that. Yeah, because I hear the noise. We got 3 hookups. Vera, tell them not to keep opening the door because we get all those squeaks. Tell them not to open the door. Go out and stay out, but don't come up in and out. If possible, of course.
Are you Italian? This is real spaghetti.
You ready, Richard?
Ready.
Wait a second.
Okay.
All right.
Patis et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Actiones nostras quesumus Domini aspirando prevenet ad prosecco et contra nostra ratio et operatio te in principio et ecce finiatur. Per Christum Dominum nostrum. Sancte Pie Decime Ordo Nobis.
Modern electronics. Okay, now before I start to speak about today's topic, I have to make 3 distinctions because I have found out that people have great trouble in distinguishing the words objective, subjective, and the words material and formal. Sometimes I have to point out that anybody who is not subject to the Roman Pontiff and who is not in union with the Church cannot be such this tape or listen to the audio tapes. One of the reasons why we cannot positively state that this Pope is that this Pope is not Pope is because, first of all, we need proof. We do not have this proof. Some people quote the Apostolic Bull of Paul IV, Cum ex Apostolato, against the present Pope, saying that Paul IV decreed that a heretic cannot become Pope. Yes, but the papal election is an act of administration, not a sacrament. It is not a theological procedure. Therefore, there cannot be an infallible pronouncement on it. It is an act of administration, just like all elections. When in a monastery an abbot is elected, this is a canonical election. The election of the Supreme Pontiff among the cardinals is a canonical election. And those rules can not only be changed, but were changed a couple of dozen times over in church history. Leo XIII changed the rules. Pius X changed the rules. Pius XI changed the rules again. Pius XII changed the rules again. Paul VI changed it, and the present Pope changed it again. And none of them has ever quoted Paul IV again on this. Now, the bull, Cum ex Apostolato, is an infallible bull as far as the doctrinal statements are concerned. It cannot be infallible as far as an administrative rule is concerned, saying that if a cardinal was a heretic, even when he was a heretic and converted, he cannot be validly elected Pope. To be validly elected Pope, you need positive human law, a law of administration. And that every single Pope can change, much unlike the doctrinal laws, which no Pope can change, ever. If a Pope decides forever on a moral issue, his successor cannot change it. Impossible. He will put himself in schism with the Church. But a rule of administration and how it can be changed, and how. In the beginning, the people of Rome elected the Pope. Later on, it was the clergy of Rome. And very much later on, only 1,300 years after Christ died and resurrected and founded his church at Pentecost, cardinals were the only ones to elect the Pope. So if a future Pope says, I don't want cardinals to elect the Pope, but all of the bishops in the world, he's going to make a mess, but that doesn't make the election invalid, because it would be horrible. I don't want to think of it. But it doesn't make the election, duly procedures required and provided, it doesn't make it invalid, because it's an act of administration. And that's why I recommend the Sede Vacantis to be a little more careful with their judgments. The Society of St. Pius X is not exactly composed of all idiots, and none of them nowadays considers the Apostolic See vacant. And the three priests, Father Sanborn, Kelly, and Secada, unfortunately, because they're otherwise very good theologians, unfortunately had to be kicked out of the Society of St. Pius X for insisting on the fact that we do not have a Pope. To me, this is a neurotic statement too, because you put yourself in a dead end. Who's going to elect the next Pope? I'll leave the question to you. Now, we are in the topic already. I mentioned the Society of St. Pius X, and Father Trenchard pointed out to you that you will not be excommunicated if you use the services of the Society of St. Pius X. Why is this so? Now, I have to presume that you will see the tapes of my conference on Thursday, Fridays, and yesterday. I do not have the time to repeat everything I said there, so there will be a lot of references to my first, second, and third lecture. In my first lecture, I explained to you how the crisis came about. In my second lecture, I explained to you what is wrong with the new Mass. And yesterday, I explained to you what is wrong with Vatican II. And in near future, you will get a complete list of all the quotations of Vatican II, which are definitely unacceptable to a Catholic. And just reading those quotations, you will be able to see what I mean. You will, even though you're not learned theologians, you will be able to use my list to see and understand what I mean. I give you one example. We have that much of time. Lumen Gentium 16 says that the Muslims together with us adore one merciful God. This is blasphemy and heresy, because it might as well be that the individual Muslim tries to find the real one God. But the Council says the Muslims, capital letter in Latin, Musulmani nobiscum adorant unum Deum. They do not adore one merciful God with us, but against us, because they deny the Incarnation and they deny the Blessed Trinity, and they use words which I don't want to repeat here to describe what the idea of the Trinity. And Vatican II has the blasphemous audacity to speak about them and the Jews praying to the same God we do. This is a thoroughly and entirely Masonic concept that cannot be accepted by any Catholic. The Muslims are not only heretics, they're pagans. And they do not adore our God because they do not adore Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Anybody who says they adore the same God we do because they nobiscum, together with us, not along with us, as one smart aleck translated, together with us is nobiscum. If you say they adore one merciful God together with us, then you sin against the first commandment gravely. We adore Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and Son incarnated man. The Word has become flesh. You see, the situation is a disaster, and that's to say the least. So in 1970, French seminarians of the Séminaire Français in Rome were threatened with being kicked out of the seminary for the simple reason that they wanted to say the rosary and wear the cassock. So they did not accept that, of course, and they asked Archbishop Lefebvre, who at this time was contemplating to retire and live the rest of his life pensioned in Rome. They were asking Archbishop Lefebvre for help. Archbishop Lefebvre was not very convinced at first that he should do that, but however they insisted, especially a certain Monsieur Tissier de Malaret, who is now Bishop Tissier de Malaret, insisted and kept insisting, and together with him another French priest who is now at the moment the second general advisor to the Society of St. Pius X. So they found a house in Fribourg in Switzerland, and Bishop Henri Charrière of Fribourg, Lausanne, and Sion at the same time gave them an official church blessing to found the society, the priestly society of St. Pius X. And so it was a work of the church, legally, regularly founded by a diocesan bishop in Switzerland. And the society was canonically, therefore canonically means according to the regulations of the Code of Canon Law, canonically erected in 1970. And after a while, Archbishop Lefebvre found the house, which is still the French-speaking main seminary today in Écon, that's in the Rhone Valley in Switzerland, the French-speaking part. And it was about after 1.5 years that Rome found out that they are celebrating the Old Mass, and they are teaching all this old stuff with Vatican II wanted to do away with. So they sent in 3 investigators, Cardinal Garon, Cardinal Wright, and Cardinal Tabera, who, quote-unquote, investigated. Right there in the place, they all gave praise on the whole outfit and said, this is beautiful, wonderful, everything according to the canonical regulations. I wish we had that elsewhere. Back in Rome, they said the exact contrary, which is typical for conciliar methods. You lie, cheat, and swindle. When you read Vatican II and its footnotes, you will find out that they lied, cheat, and swindle. They, in one and the same sentence, footnote at the end, they quote the guy, a church father or somebody else, quote it in the footnote in the first half of the sentence, and then they say the contrary in the second half of the sentence, and put the footnote after the second half of the sentence, quoting, for example, in Gaudium et Spes 22:2, the church father Justinus, contrary to what Justinus said. This is the method of Vatican II and the Novus Ordo Church, the counterfeit church out there. They reported to Rome that this is not that the seminary in Écon was not according to the standards of Vatican II, etc., etc. You can very well imagine what they said. And so Rome said, we're going to shut down this thing. Archbishop Lefebvre, contrary to canon law, never even got a hearing, let alone a cause at the competent church tribunal. Never anything. You can read this in detail in one of the books available at the bookstands of the Society of St. Pius X. Archbishop Lefebvre was not even heard, which is against canon law. And then the official close down of the Society of St. Pius X, not by the Pope, but by the Secretary of State, was silently acknowledged by Pope Paul VI, and Archbishop Lefebvre, the person concerned, never had a chance to defend himself. So this is the methods of, as Father Trinchard pointed out, tyrants who do not, they use canon law when it serves their purposes. But they do not understand canon law, they do not understand divine law, they do not understand eternal law, and they do not understand the meaning of law itself, the purpose of law, justice. So the Society of St. Pius X went on all the same. Rome explicitly forbade Archbishop Lefebvre to ordain priests. However, in 1976, he did ordain priests against the explicit instruction of Rome, and so they suspended him ad divinis. That means he was further on, according to what Rome believed, further on he was not allowed to say Mass except privately, and he was not allowed to give the sacraments except in the case of emergency. And this is exactly what we are in. We are in a case of emergency. The Church provides jurisdiction. Read canon law. The new code of canon law confirms what I say. I do not have to quote the old canon law to make my point. The new code of canon law affirms in several canons the old law of emergency. Now, why are we in an emergency? Well, listen to my lecture 1, 2, and 3, and you will see we are definitely in an emergency with 99% of the hierarchy preaching heresy. You need Catholic priests. You do not want to go to confession to a priest who says, "Oh, come on, that's not a sin. What's the matter with you?" Today's priests tell young people in the confessional it's all right to go to bed before you're married. Wonderful. This is not what you want when you go to confession. You want to hear the Catholic moral theology, also because otherwise the absolution is invalid. So here, some people, some conservatives, I'm not a conservative, I warn you, I'm just plain Catholic. So some conservatives are worried about the jurisdiction of the Society of St. Pius X. They are absolutely not worried about priests who explain away sins in the confessional, which makes absolution invalid. They're absolutely not concerned and worried about priests who give general absolution, which in 99.999 cases is invalid. I have so far known only one single case of general absolution having been valid after the Second World War. And that was on a plane that was threatened with a crash. And the priest got up, turned around, grabbed the microphone, and said, "Anybody who's a Catholic, do an act of contrition, ego vos absolvo peccatis vestris," and so on, gave general absolution. That's valid according to Pius XII. It's valid according even to the decrees of the present Pope. 99.9% of all general absolutions are not valid. Nobody's hooked up with that problem. The conservatives are always worried about the jurisdiction of St. Pius X. Well, I tell you, the Society of St. Pius X gets the jurisdiction for absolution out of canon law. Canon law says jurisdiction can be given either by the competent authority or by the Church itself. The Church itself gives the jurisdiction for absolution or for marriages, as a matter of fact, in certain cases. I'll give you one example. A priest on a ship has all faculties automatically. Sure, he's the only one who can be approached for confession. I mean, if you commit a mortal sin on a cruiser, and that's very easy with the temptations out there, you don't want to die, you don't want to go to hell in case you die the next day or the ship sinks. So you might want a priest to confess to. And this priest usually does not have the faculties of confession out there on the ship, because there's no bishop around who would give him the faculty. So the Church gives the faculties. And in any case of emergency, not just in the case of danger of death. See, canon law speaks about the danger of death, but it speaks about emergencies. It does not exclude other emergencies, because canon law is never exclusive without explicitly saying so. That's one of the first canons in the book. So the Society of St. Pius X has jurisdiction simply for the fact that there are no other Catholic priests around, or not enough. You're not, as a Catholic, you are not under the obligation to take a plane into another city in this country to be able to find a Catholic priest for confessing, you want to confess to. That would be ridiculous. The Church is never ridiculous, because canon law can never be above the highest law of the Church, Canon 1725 of the New Code of Canon Law. Suprema lex ecclesiae salus animarum. The highest law of the Church is the salvation of souls. It is absolutely and positively and definitely against the salvation of souls if you are forced to confess to a heretical priest, to a priest who speaks heresy in the sermons, who celebrates the Novus Ordo Missa, which is illicit and against divine law, and who gives the sacraments in the Novus Ordo, which is illicit and against divine law. You don't want to confess to this priest. So, canon law cannot be above divine law. That's absurd. And Archbishop Lefebvre knew that, and this is why he was going on. And he went on, and then he didn't get younger. So by the time it was 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre was already 83 years old. Now that's about usually the time to say goodbye to this world. Now Archbishop Lefebvre knew the moment he was dead, nobody, no bishop, not a single one, would be willing to ordain young men to be Catholic priests. What does it mean, Catholic priests? Now, rest assured, I know the situation in seminaries all over the world, diocesan seminaries, very well. I could give you an explicit description of what is going on in modern seminaries, but I can't because there's ladies present. I'm not joking. I could not possibly, in front of a present lady, tell you what is going on in new seminaries, but take an educated guess on several perversions of the Sixth Commandment. There is no way a Novus Ordo bishop, and except at the moment, 5, 6 bishops at the moment, all others are Novus Ordo bishops and are not willing to ordain a young man who refuses Vatican II, refer to my yesterday's lecture, and who refuses the Novus Ordo Missa, refer to my lecture on Friday. So you cannot become a Catholic priest if you accept Vatican II. I proved this yesterday. You cannot be a Catholic priest if you celebrate the Novus Ordo. I proved this yesterday, the day before yesterday. So we were in a situation in 1988, and this is before the Fraternity of St. Peter and the Institute of Christ the King and similar organizations came about, mind you. We were in a situation that there were 2 bishops in the whole world willing to ordain Catholic priests. Oh, I shouldn't do this. Some people say I'm a Mason if I do this sign. I've learned my lectures. So 2. There were 2 bishops around who were willing to ordain young men who refused Vatican II and the Novus Ordo. If those 2 bishops had, mind you, if they didn't, if those 2 bishops had died and nobody else would have ordained priests according to the old laws of the Church, the prophecy of Christ in Matthew 16:18 would have turned out to be a lie. That cannot be. The moment Archbishop Lefebvre realized that if he did not ordain bishops, if he did not consecrate the bishops, apparently against the will of the Pope, I say apparently, I will explain later, there would be nobody left. And he was dead right on the spot because both Archbishop Lefebvre and Bishop Castro-Mayor died in 1991, 3 years after. He had more than reasons enough to distrust Rome. There is the famous story of the paper that Archbishop Lefebvre signed the 5th of May, 1988, 2 months before the Episcopal consecrations. In this paper, which is usually presented by the Vatican as an agreement, another lie. It was not an agreement, but the protocol of a conversation, a discussion. So when Archbishop Lefebvre, on the 5th of May, signed the protocol, he signed a protocol. That's what it was, a protocol, not an agreement. And still he had to take back his signature later on because, now in this protocol, they discussed the possibilities of having an organization with the blessing of the Holy See to keep a traditionalist seminary and the traditional rite of Mass going as an exceptional thing, so to speak, as if the Novus Ordo Missae was ever a rite of the Church, which is another lie. The Novus Ordo Missae is not a work of the Church. It has no blessing from the Church, and it is against divine law. I proved this. So the true rite of the Latin Roman Church, the Catholic Church of the Latin Roman Rite, is the old Mass, canonized forever by St. Pius V in 1570 with his decree Quo Primum, which you will be able to read in Father Trinshot's book. And so they had no right to give an exceptional permission. They should have done the opposite, done away with the new rite and got the old rite back. However, they offered Archbishop Lefebvre an organization of pontifical rite headed by a commission of 7 members. And now get this. By a commission of 7 members. Who would the 7 members have been? 5 chosen by the Vatican. The 6th one would have been the one bishop. They would have ordained for that purpose, the very one bishop. And the 7th would have been a member chosen by the Society of St. Pius X. We live in a democratic, well, I don't, but the Novus Ordo people live in a democratic church. Now get this, 5 against 2. And the bishop here would have been chosen by Rome, so 6 against 1. It would have been a lot more honest to tell Archbishop Lefebvre, listen, we will not give you a bishop, we will put you under pontifical rite, but we will decide what will go on. And the future, in 1988 it was future, and the future was to prove what Archbishop Lefebvre suspected. Because the Fraternity of St. Peter was promised a bishop. I can't see a bishop given to the Fraternity of St. Peter's yet. And we are almost 10 years after that. The indult masses, like in Providence, Rhode Island, the indult mass, the priest has to give communion in the hand or he's not allowed to celebrate the mass there. Monsignor Perl, who is the in charge, the secretary of the Commission Ecclesia Dei, he asked the indult people in Vienna, Austria, said, why don't you give communion in the hand? It would make everything so much easier. This is what Archbishop Lefebvre predicted in 1988. So when he found out, he went back to Rome, he asked Cardinal Ratzinger, when are you going to give me this bishop? I'm not going to live for long anymore. And Cardinal Ratzinger said, oh, I can't give you a date. I can't give you an exact date. Archbishop Lefebvre tried again. He said, well, how about the 15th of August? Can I rely on your consecrating a bishop for my purposes the 15th of August? Oh, no, I can't give you a definite answer on that. Well, what do you call that? In English, it's called stalling. And stalling usually has not exactly an honest purpose, except in war. So Archbishop Lefebvre said, okay, I see what's going on. Emergency applies. Emergency is there. We have a case of emergency. The rules for self-defense, the rules for defense apply. And the 30th of June, 1988, he consecrated 4 bishops for a simple reason. It's very easy to rub out one bishop. I have lived in Rome for 15 years. I know people who are capable of doing this. There were 3 attempts on 2 of the Pope's secretaries' lives. 3 attempts. There was one of the Pope's secretaries, a certain Monsignor Kabongo, somewhere in Africa, I don't remember which diocese. Monsignor Kabongo, pretty good man. If you handed him a letter for the Pope, he would hand the letter directly to the Pope and not to the Secretary of State for the trash can there or the paper shredder. So they threatened him with life, and then they tried to kill him. He was one of those curious creatures who would drive a bicycle in Rome, which means a daring person, and he left Porta Sant'Anna, and a car drove by and pushed him over. Luckily, Italian drivers are extremely fast in reaction. The front tire of a huge truck was right here. So they wanted to give Archbishop Lefebvre 1 bishop. I once discussed this with Bishop Fillet, and I said, I hope it is not allowed to you to travel on the same plane, all the four of you. And he said, no, we are not allowed to. You get why? Planes have been bombed for lesser reasons, like life insurance, cashing life insurance, or getting rid of a politician over Bosnia, or trying out what would be the reaction of the people with a TWA flight over the Atlantic. Huh? So there are some people in the Vatican who would not shrink from murder. And Archbishop Lefebvre realized he needed 4 bishops because by 1988 his organization was worldwide. And he has a bishop in Argentina, and he has a bishop in the United States, Bishop Williamson in Winona, the local seminary. He has a bishop in Switzerland, who is now the Secretary General, and he has a second bishop in Switzerland, Monsignor Tessier de Malaret, whom I mentioned before. And those 2 bishops in Switzerland are not always in Switzerland because they have to do an awful lot of traveling all over the world. Last time I met Fillet, he had just been coming back from somewhere, I remember not, yes, the Philippines. So these 4 bishops, thank God they're young, but these 4 bishops are under a constant stress, they're in constant traveling, and I thank the Lord we have 6 bishops now, because there's the 5th one, Monsignor Rangel in the Diocese of Campos in Brazil, which would be a story for another lecture, and Monsignor Lasso, a retired bishop from the Philippines, God bless him, who has joined the Society of St. Pius X. This emergency, which can easily be proven in canon law, this emergency caused Rome to found a new organization, the Fraternity of St. Peter. Some of the priests, most of them, by the way, not in disagreement with the consecrations, the Episcopal consecrations, that's another one of those tiny little dishonesties, or deviations from truth, or, as you put it in politically correct speak, untruth. Most of them didn't leave the Society of St. Pius X because they were against the Episcopal consecrations, but because they wanted to leave anyway. So then now they had a new chance. And the Fraternity of St. Peter was founded for the only and exclusive purpose to get people away from the Society of St. Pius X. Ain't that nice? So, an organization like this does not have the blessing of the Holy Spirit because the Church does not do things like this. The Church does not do that. Enough about the Fraternity of St. Peter. Why did I say before that Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated those 4 bishops with the will of the Pope? What is the will of the Pope? What is it? Now, the present Pope is a man who says Christ is really substantially present on the altar in Mass. And then he celebrates a Mass that never mentions this fact. So what does he mean? In another one of his encyclicals, the Pope says, only if you have the full Catholic truth you can be saved. And then in another place he says, Christ does not deny salvation to the efforts, mind you, of Protestant churches. Doesn't mean the individual Protestant. Maybe. But the efforts of Protestant churches, never. So what does he mean? Well, if I'm nice to the Pope and I'm respectful to the Pope, and I have to choose between one of his 2 opinions, I will choose the one that confirms with church tradition. Now, if the Pope says to Archbishop Lefebvre, I don't want you to ordain these bishops, but at the same time, in writing, he has signed the new Code of Canon Law, which in Canon 1725 says, the highest law of the Church is the salvation of the souls, and Archbishop Lefebvre was able to prove that the salvation of the souls depended on correct theology, on correct confessors, and on the only right of the Roman Catholic Church. He had the will of the Pope, the real will of the Pope, the will of the Vicar of Christ, the will of the successor to St. Peter, not the will of Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II. Again, another one of those contradictions. So what would he have gone according to? I mean, you don't choose the heresy, you choose the orthodoxy. Okay? So he went on, and as a matter of fact, at the Episcopal consecrations, the 30th of June 1988, the Mandatum Apostolicum was read. The Mandatum Apostolicum is a letter, and there's a prescribed formula for it, that says, I, John Paul II, bishops of the Church, Vicar of Christ, Bishop of Rome, Archbishop of etc., Primate of Italy, and Primate of the West, and Patriarch of the West, and so on, and servant of the servants of God, hereby allow you, Bishop so-and-so, or Archbishop so-and-so, or Cardinal so-and-so, or anybody in good standing with the Catholic Church, to consecrate the following priest, to the bishophood. Archbishop Lefebvre, of course, could not put in the name John Paul II, so he said the Church, exactly according to canon law. If my bishop refuses to give faculties of confession to me, and one of you comes to me and says, Father, I want to confess to a Catholic priest, could you hear my confession? I got, in that moment, latest in that moment, I get the faculty from the Church, and that is declared in canon law. Archbishop Lefebvre received the faculties to consecrate those bishops because of the emergency situation in the Church provided by canon law. These were canonically correct consecrations. You understand this? And that's basically the story of the Society of St. Pius X. And they're the only ones who, unlike me in rather milder terms, but very definitely, acknowledge the fact that the present Pope's encyclicals are packed with heresy. The Fraternity of St. Peter officially agrees with Vatican II and officially agrees with the present Pope's encyclicals. So they are not Catholics, officially, objectively. They are formally not Catholics. Formally, in their heart, I don't know. I have friends in the Fraternity of St. Peter's who are good priests, but formally, they're not Catholics. Formally, they're in heresy because they sign and affirm officially, formally, objectively, heresy, which means Vatican II. Refer to yesterday's lecture. And the same with the Institute of Christ the King. The Institute of Christ the King, founded by Monsignor Vac, and because I was stupid enough not to see what was going on, and I like to have this on tape because Monsignor Vac never tells anybody about it, the Institute of Christ the King could only be founded because I was the bum who made it possible that he had 4 priests ordained. I'm not going to say here how I did it. And so he was able to start the Institute of Christ the King because now he had 6 priests instead of 2. Unfortunately, because as much as I like the Institute of Christ the King, as much as I like their priests, and I really like them, one of them is my best friend, Monsignor Vac celebrated with the Pope second Eucharistical prayer, together with Dom Gérard Calvet, the abbot of the Benedictine monastery in France, that he founded to celebrate the Old Rite. They celebrate the 1965 Rite, if you call that the Old Rite, I don't know. And both of them celebrated with the Pope, something, pardon me, something which in the old liturgy you had only at Episcopal consecrations, and in quite a different form of today. They both celebrated with the Pope second Eucharistical prayer. I have seen the picture. So you know what's going on. You cannot say that the Novus Ordo is against divine law and then celebrate it for diplomatical reasons. Either you mistakenly say this is the liturgy of the Church, then you might as well celebrate it, or you say what I say, it's against divine law, and that's the reason why I'm not celebrating it, then you can also not do it for diplomatical reasons. And if they do not say, if the Fraternity of St. Peter and if the Institute of Christ the King do not say that the Novus Ordo is against divine law, then why do they celebrate the old Mass? Because it's more beautiful? Okay, they're running a museum.